Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles when you
Chase
show.
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got it.
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to be great and dominate.
All right. Guys, before we started recording this show, I got a little tingle in my spine because we're getting legitimate football news and legitimate football reports. It's right around the corner. I can smell the freshly grown grass. Guys, thank you for tuning in to Operation Domination. Make sure you download your favorite podcast app and subscribe to us on YouTube, on the YouTube channel of the Fantasy Football Advice Network at FF Advice Net. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mater, joined here with Adam LaRue and Chase Thornton, the full crew in the building. Before we get into those positional camp battles, we have actual news that we have to quickly talk about. All right, so most of these I'm just going to rattle off pretty quickly. We are going to respond to one of the pieces of news that came out this past week. So first off the top, Garrett Wilson, Dynasty Lovers, 4 years, $120 million. He's locked in to, or $130 million, excuse me. Sauce Gardner got the $120 million contract, but he's locked into the Jets for the next 4 years. He ain't going anywhere. So we'll see what that entails towards the future. Najee Harris, what is with NFL players and firework accidents? Stay away. Just stay away. They say it's a superficial eye injury, but nonetheless, it's decent enough where he is going to have to start training camp on the NFI list. Now, remember, the non-football list, he can come back at any time. It's not expected to be too serious. He's expected to participate in training camp at some point. Maybe when we talk to Dr. Brian Scott next week, he'll have some kind of inside information on fireworks blasting in your eyeballs and how that can affect you. Juwan Jennings, he wants a new contract or he wants to get traded. I'll give you my 2 cents on this really quick. He's not getting traded, okay? Now, whether he gets an extension deal done or the 49ers decide to give him some sort of extra guaranteed money with incentives for this season, that's to be determined. All you need to worry about from fantasy purposes is that there's at this point, no indication that he plans to hold out or hold in during training camp, making this not part of the Brand Ayuk playbook, thankfully. So I'm not going to move him for fantasy purposes. If he drops down a little bit in ADP, maybe becomes even more of a value. Let's get into the piece of news I do want to have a little reaction to here today. So Quinshon Judkins gets arrested for domestic violence. And the reason why this gets murky, it's not just because of, the accusation, right? And what that could entail. He does have a court date set, but because where this is different than the Rashee Rice situation, where the NFL seems intent on just letting the judicial system just play itself out. They have a precedent where they'll go in and investigate and dish out suspensions with domestic violence abuse without it going through the court system. So this is where it starts to get a little hairy. Plus, he's a rookie. He doesn't necessarily have established himself. He was a high-end second-round draft pick. I do think he was drafted with the idea that he would be the starter. Adam, I wanted to go to you to get your reaction on this.
The other part of this that's really fascinating is that the Browns haven't signed him yet. And it sure sounds like they're pumping the brakes on signing his rookie contract with this this whole situation now kind of coming forward. So we have, to your point, the precedent that domestic violence is kind of the exception to the waiting for the court system play itself out. He's not on an NFL contract right now. He's assumed to be joining the Cleveland Browns, but no guarantees as of this point. And at the very least, he's not someone who's going to be at training camp for if I said foreseeable future, would anyone have a rebuttal? Because I don't see it happening, at least in the next few weeks, if he's not signed. And now the Browns are, at least it sounds like, are waiting to do an investigation of their own to put pen to paper on their end. So now that's, kind of stalled from both sides and not just him, not wanting to play ball. So I think that there's a lot here that is very worrisome for both his fantasy value It may be interesting if you have one of the other backs for the Browns, but if you have pretty much anyone else, this is a problem because you were really hoping that having a competent rushing attack was going to allow, like if you have any faith in any of the offensive players here, you were hoping it was going to be because the rushing attack was competent and that was kind of allowing for a mediocre passing attack to, just dink and dime their way up the field because teams were playing the run. And if they're not playing the run, if they're playing the pass, then nobody here is going to have any value. Nobody.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it just murkies up everything. I mean, I don't think the expectation as of now is he's going to miss all of training camp or anything like that. But to your point, he is a rookie. He may miss some. They drafted Dylan Sampson in the 4th round, and you have incumbent Jerome Ford, who's not chopped liver. I mean, this is a player who averaged 5.6 yards per touch. That was 7th in the position last season. He was 10th in routes run. Like, this is somebody who's given them a safety valve in the past when they've needed to turn to him. So if anything, what happens is that even when Judkins does come back in training camp, we may be seeing a 3 split or at least a 2 split. And we're talking about Judkins as top 24 running back for redraft purposes coming into the league before this happened. So it just makes everything real murky to be determined as of now. If I were drafting today, let's say, I'd probably just be steering clear of this backfield really altogether. I will mention as far as the contract signing goes, the Browns are one of 29 other teams that have not signed their 2nd round draft picks. So I don't know if this will necessarily play into that. I think the idea is that they're still going to get them signed and get it done. But to your point, maybe we see how this plays out. So yeah, just a situation we're going to have to keep our eyes on. And that's the biggest news to me, where we just don't know and have a lot of answers for you yet, other than, again, if you're drafting today, probably steer clear of the Browns. Maybe we'll know more in a few weeks. With that, let's get into our training camp battles and our offseason takes.
Heck yeah, let's get this going. Training camps are here, everybody. Training camps are here. Chargers veterans reported today. Meanwhile, the Detroit Lions vets are going to report this coming Saturday, and those two teams, of course, are going to be facing off in the annual Hall of Fame game here on July 31st. 2 weeks from tomorrow. 2 weeks from tomorrow, we will have football on the field in the NFL. Now, to celebrate, hallelujah indeed, to celebrate here, and of course, to get you ready to dominate your competition here this fantasy season, we're going to preview some of our most intriguing fantasy training camp battles, position battles. These outcomes are going to be important to keep an eye on. And you're going to want to stay abreast of these situations as we get into the heart here of fantasy draft season over the coming month and a half or so. That's right, month and a half or so, 7 weeks from tomorrow, 2025 season kicks off with the Cowboys and Eagles in Philly. And with that, let's get to it here. The Cleveland Browns are going to be opening their camp for rookies this Friday, 7/18. And next Tuesday, their vets will report. And here to talk about several of those on each side of that equation, Adam Leroux is going to talk to us about the Browns quarterback battle. Adam, what do you got for us here from Cleveland?
Yeah, it's more wild, kind of topsy-turvy, whatever. You want to talk about making things murky. This quarterback battle is really murky, and I think it's getting even weirder by the day because it seems like there is a clear, or early on in the training camp, and we all talked about how we think it should be Joe Flacco, and that's one thing. But it seemed like the reporting out of the building was that they want it to be Kenny Pickett. Well, in the recent week or so, it has seemed very clear that at least those close to the Browns, the reporters around the Browns, think that Joe Flacco will end up being the quarterback as much as the team does not want it to be Joe Flacco, which makes the whole thing look really, really strange. And what I think is interesting to me and why this is a battle I wanted to talk about is because I think it is actually meaningful for which players you might want to target if you're looking at one of these guys as a deep value. I mean, for instance, as a full-time starter, Kenny Pickett has, I believe, 1 season above an 8 dot. Yeah, we have 7.5, 8, and 8 as his 2 seasons as a starter. Well, Jerry Jeudy was the average depth of target towards Jerry Jeudy, who everyone loves, and everyone's drafting Jerry Jeudy relatively high this season, and people are considering him a value. Jerry Jeudy's average depth of target was like 11.5 this past season. He was doing his work with when Jameis became the starter and when some of these other quarterbacks throwing the ball down the field became the starters. So if you're hoping for Jerry Jeudy to be impactful, you really want it to be Joe Flacco, because whether it's Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, or Kenny Pickett, these are all guys that it's going to be a lot shorter down the field. And maybe if you're really hoping for, like, you're like me maybe, and you have some dynasty shares of Deontay Johnson you weren't able to get rid of, maybe you're hoping and praying that it's one of these guys prone to throwing the ball short, like a Kenny Pickett, one of the rookies. Like, maybe that's your hope. If it's Njoku, I think you're kind of good either way. But otherwise, if it's Cedric Tillman or Jerry Jeudy, you really, really want it to be Joe Flacco. And if you have a Deontay, or if you're really hoping that one of these running backs going to be a PPR guy, then you really hope it's Kenny Pickett or one of the rookies. So I think, there's some interestingness there. I think it's similar to the Colts quarterback situation where it actually does. It's not just. I mean, I actually think in both situations, and we'll talk about it later when we talk about that battle. But I don't really even care, like, in terms of playing the quarterback. It's like, what does it do to the players around you? Because the players that are going to be interesting to play for fantasy are completely different depending on who's playing quarterback. Because, I mean, let's be honest, Kenny Pickett's not throwing the ball far down the field. I don't think the rookies are going to be any different. Like, maybe Shedeur could surprise us. I wouldn't be that surprised if that's the case. Dylan Gabriel's certainly not slinging the ball down the field, and Kenny Pickett's certainly not slinging the ball down the field. I don't know. This situation is one that I'm definitely going to be really keen to watch once, as you mentioned, we're a few days from the Browns rookies. I think, Friday, right? You said Friday?
Yep.
Yeah, so these Browns rookies will be reporting, and then we'll be getting the vets in soon, and we'll actually get some substance to this battle. But hopefully we figure it out firmly before we're drafting for redraft, because I think it really changes. I mean, Jerry Jeudy to me is the key figure in it, but it really changes how we're treating a lot of these guys. Pretty much everyone that's not David Njoku, I think who wins, you change their value.
Yeah, and what's crazy about that too is, I mean, even Joe Flacco with the Colts last year was not slinging it down the field like he was that little spurt with
still 9, which is a whole yard over anything in Kenny Pickett's career.
100%, which is why we needed to be Joe Flacco. But my point more so being that even then it's a little bit shaky. So we haven't really been able to get into this, and we probably will in August. But Jerry Jeudy's gonna be one of my, we do like the best 5, bust 5, sleeper 5. He was gonna be one of my bust 5 wide receivers coming to this thing, no matter who the quarterback is. I don't know why he's going in the top 24 wide receivers. He only showed up for you. The only time you did your fantasy lineup was when Jameis Winston was the quarterback last season. Before, after, forget it. You didn't want him anywhere near your lineup. So why are we drafting a top 24 wide receiver, especially when there's only one quarterback we feel like he might have a chance with? To your point, maybe Shedeur, but the Browns have to get out of their own way with Shedeur in the first place. They still won't even give him first team reps. So I don't know how that's going to play out.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to end it with this, Chase. I think the only reason that they want it to be Kenny Pickett is just because he's younger, and they're hoping that either they can unlock some potential that he didn't get to show before, or they can unlock enough where he becomes some sort of an asset. I think is the only real reason. I don't think it's going to come to fruition.
Best case, I think they're looking at a compensatory. Like, that's like, if I'm the Browns and I got a compensatory for Kenny Pickett, I'd be like, hallelujah.
Right. You'd be over the moon with that. I mean, I think there's a soft spot in people's hearts, especially in fantasy here, because everybody looks back at that 2023, that little 5-game spurt he had there at the end for them, and everybody's like, oh, he was so good. He was so good. Well, yeah, he had over 20 fantasy points a game for that 5-game stretch. But he also threw the ball over 40 times a game. That's 6 full attempts per game over his career average with any other team he's played for, no matter where you're talking. If you're talking the Jets, you're talking wherever you're talking. I think I agree with you there that they want Kenny Pickett to be the guy just because he's younger and because there might be something there, but there's nothing there to excite anybody. Like you said, Mary Kay Cabot and some of the other Browns beat writers and that have said that he didn't pop at all in OTAs. He just doesn't look like he has that it factor. And Deontay Johnson, if you listen to him, I don't know why anybody would listen to him. I'd check the sky if he told me it was blue right now, because I don't believe anything from that dude. But Deontay Johnson says, "Oh yeah, no, Pickett I think should be the favorite." I don't know why you're so excited about Kenny Pickett, Deontay. He targeted you 147 times in 2022, and you didn't score a touchdown.
But he got 140 targets. That's a whole lot better than last year.
0 touchdowns and his lowest career yards per reception. Because, like you said, Kenny just does not sling that thing. He can run a little bit, which is maybe a little more exciting than Flacco in the grand scheme of things. But the Browns want to run it under center, and I think that's where the rookies are going to struggle because they were both shotgun guys in college there. Gabriel, nobody expected him to do anything. I literally jumped off the couch in Green Bay when I was watching that section of the draft. I was like, are you kidding me? They took him before I couldn't believe that. But this situation is a mess, and it doesn't matter who wins this camp battle. There are no winners here in this camp battle. This wasn't an offense I don't think anybody wanted to invest highly in anyway, especially now with the backfield mess. So I would say everybody, steer clear.
In the aisle. There's no Hagel, and there's no Santa Claus, and there's no Christmas, there's no God, there's no Easter Bunny, there's nothing.
That's how it's got to be a Browns fan. Like, seriously, there's that amount you believe in nothing. Here's what I'm going to leave you guys with, and I'll kick it back to Chase. David Njoku is a sleeper no matter who the quarterback is. Remember, this is a guy, half point, full point PPR leagues. He's going as tight end 10 right now. You're getting 7-9 targets. When you're tight end getting 7-9 targets and you're still able to finish as a mid tight end 1, he is a sleeper no matter who the quarterback is. That's it. I don't know if I want to touch anything else.
No, I agree with that completely. Other than that, yeah, I mean, none of these guys are jumping off the page. I'm not running to the podium for any of them here. But with that, let's move on to Los Angeles. I told you at the start of the show here, top of the show, that the Chargers camp open today for their vets. Their rookies have already been there since last Saturday. They've got an early game to get ready for here. But I want to talk about the Omarion Hampton and Najee Harris battle, such as it is right now. Okay, now you look at this battle, you look first, you got to look at Najee Harris, the guy that they signed in the offseason. It's only a 1-year contract, but they did bring him in. They targeted him. They were willing to let JK Dobbins go. They were willing to let Gus Edwards go. So they bring in Harris. He's 6'1", he's 242. He's 27 years old. So he still hasn't aged out for a running back, although we do like our running backs younger. Guy had a monster 2021 rookie season, right? 15.5 points per game in a half PPR setting. 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns. The big thing where he made a ton of ground up in terms of fantasy for us that year was he caught 74 of 94 targets for 467 yards and 3 more touchdowns. In fact, he led all running backs, period, in targets and receptions that season. He was second in rush attempts, and he ended up being the running back 4 overall his rookie season and running back 9 on a points per game basis there. Now, he's been more pedestrian since then, okay? And mostly that's due to the fact that he lost receiving work. Jaylen Warren came in and took some of that work away in 2022. And then the next couple years, 2023, he took about 2/3 of the targets. He took about half the running back targets last season. And he's been taking about 1/3 of the rushing work over those last 2 seasons. So we haven't seen Harris be that volume monster the last couple of years. But he still was running back 14 overall, 21 overall, and 20 overall. So he still has been a running back 2 for you that you could rely on there. Now he only averages about 3.9, 4.0 yards a carry. He's a classic volume guy. He is a classic volume guy, which is why his rookie season, I should say, he lit it up for us because he was touching the ball every 30 seconds. It seemed like a game time. Now he has complicated things with his 4th of July celebrations, as we talked about. He probably should have been here with us, celebrating our style instead. But like you said, the injury is supposed to be superficial. He went on the NFI today, but he's not expected to miss a whole lot of time. They said he will definitely be ready for the season. They said that in all of their conversations with him, they haven't seen him yet until they report. They haven't seen him yet until today, but they were more worried about his friend, apparently, who had much more severe injuries. Overall, I mean, you're talking about a guy who has been a steady 1,000-yard rusher all 4 years of his career so far. Nobody else really in the NFL can pretty much say that. He's been strong. All right. He has the 3rd most missed tackles forced since he came into the league. He also has the 5th most explosive runs in that time, and those are runs of 10 or more yards. Caveat to that, he doesn't have a single run over 40 yards, so his lack of speed kind of shows up there. He's good at breaking that thing, but not necessarily taking that thing, if you know what I'm saying. But last season was his best graded out season in terms of PFF grades there. He looked strong in his contract year and got himself signed this offseason. And then they went and drafted Omarion Hampton, okay? And Omarion Hampton, little smaller, not quite as big as Najee Harris, 6 foot 220. But again, he's only 22 years old. He's a little bit faster. He ran a 4.46 40 there. This is a guy who was a second-team All-American the last 2 seasons at North Carolina there. He was a Doak Walker Award finalist the last 2 seasons. And last season he ranked 3rd in all of FBS with 1,660 rushing yards. He averaged 5.9 a carry on 281 carries. So this is another guy who can take the volume, but he's a little more, he's got the potential to be a little more efficient with his carries than we see out of Najee Harris. He's strong. Again, he's a punisher. He's got good contact balance. He led the nation in yards after contact last season. He had 1,072 yards after contact last season in FBS there, in the ACC and against all of his opponents, really. But the thing that I think is going to handicap him a little bit here, independent of what we just found out about the injury with Harris, Hampton isn't as strong a pass blocker as Najee Harris is. Najee Harris has a very good reputation for his pass blocking. He's taken his rookie season, he had more pass blocking snaps than anybody in the league, and he does dang well at it. Omarion Hampton, not quite as strong a pass blocker as Harris. He's going to have to work on that, especially at the NFL level, and especially when you're talking about protecting a quarterback like Justin Herbert, who is going to be the absolute key to anything that happens on offense there in Los Angeles for the Chargers. Everybody loves the new shiny toy. And this is going to be a theme that I think we come back to again and again here today as we talk about these battles. We just talked about it with the Browns, even, that there's rookies and vets competing for this job. Everybody's in love with Omarion Hampton right now. He's going as the running back 17, 46th overall. So right around the tail end, mid to tail end of that 4th round there. Najee's going as running back 36 right now, 104 overall, which in 12-team leagues, which is how I base my rounds on, 104 overall, that's the tail end of the 9th round. I don't think that they're that far apart in terms of how at least early in the season, I don't think they're that far apart with how they're going to be used. This looks to me like a 1A, 1B situation. And I think Harris is the A initially, provided this eye injury isn't anything to worry about. I think at least he's going to be in on passing downs a lot more to protect Herbert, and because of his reputation, because of his abilities there. Hampton needs to use whatever time Harris does lose out on, whatever time he does miss. He needs to use that time to learn that offense, get himself up to the NFL speed, and work on his pass blocking. If he can do that, I think he can take more and more of that. And I think that position may flop by the end of the season. But I think this is much more a 1A, 1B situation. I think they both can carry mid to low running back value independent of each other this season. Harris could be a real draft steal, to be honest with you, being taken as low as he is, if he is the one who is leading this backfield. If either of them miss any time this season, the other one skyrockets to the moon. But I don't think that this is as big a gap as the ADP right now would have you believe. I think everybody's excited about the shiny new toy in fantasy world, like we always are. I don't think they're that far apart. I'm curious if you guys have anything else you want to say about it.
Well, here's what I would say right off the rip. You might not be wrong about the month of September, but I do think they'll be this far apart when we get into fantasy playoff time. And I think that's what the key is as of this moment. If you're drafting Omarion Hampton, and there's a number of guys like this that we are going to talk about throughout the summer, that you're not drafting them for the season of September. You're drafting them for the season of November and December, where the things are going to break at. You kind of mentioned it a little bit. Omarion Hampton is built to be a much more explosive player than Najee Harris. And while, yes, Harris is, as of right now, a better pass blocker, you don't have to be great as a rookie. You just have to be competent. I don't think it will take long for Omarion Hampton to be competent. And one of the things that I wrote up in his draft report is that while he's not touted as a big pass catcher, he's a pretty efficient pass receiver. 1.39 yards per out run. I mean, he was no slouch. He could definitely do the routes that Najee Harris does, and again, with a little bit more explosion. Besides all that, when you look at what they did with JK Dobbins and Gus Edwards last season. I mean, Dobbins was about a 60% and Gus Edwards about 32%. Kamani Vidal kind of worked in there a little bit. That's about the split you saw. Maybe that's closer to like a 55-45 between these two guys. And then we'll see if Omarion Hampton takes over when we get into those later months, depending on how well he's playing, because I could see this team going into the playoffs and saying, we're going to start to ride one guy. Remember, Hampton has first-round draft capital. Running backs who have first-round draft capital, especially in today's day and age, it ain't going to take long for them to be the starter, if at all. And I think that's the biggest thing riding for him right now. They gave Najee Harris money because they didn't know if they were definitely going to be taking a running back. Once they decided to make that decision, I think come week 6, week 7, it's going to be the Omarion Hampton show, at least maybe in the same way that it was Dobbins over Gus Edwards, like a 60-30 split we're talking about there.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the explosiveness, I don't disagree with the take or the desire of everybody to see that happen. It does make me pause a little bit to want to use a prime draft pick on a guy that I may not get as much out of for the first half of the season, that I may have to cover my own ASS for the first half of the season here. He's spending that prime draft capital to get that guy. I'm not sure that I feel comfortable doing that right now.
Here's what I'll say to your point, Chase, is that I would probably be more inclined to take a wide receiver where Omarion Hampton is going currently and redraft 12-man leagues than necessarily go that route. So I definitely give you that part of it. It just depends on what your roster build and what it is you're looking at. I don't know, Adam, you want to chime in here?
Yeah, no, I unfortunately I'm going to do the stereotypical thing that I do and play the middle ground a little bit. Like
that's why
I think Omarion Hampton is going to be the lead back in terms of the fantasy relevant stuffs fairly quickly. I do think Najee Harris, kind of to the point of pass pro, I think he's going to be on the field just enough that it's a little annoying, right? Where it's not like Najee Harris is fantasy relevant, but it's Najee Harris is pass blocking like, a good handful of snaps per game, and he's getting a couple carries a game, and he's more of a thorn in the side of Omarion Hampton. I've thought that Omarion Hampton is a little bit overvalued, but I don't know that it's, I don't think the carries and the receptions are going to be like close, but I do think that Najee is going to be annoying, especially, if, his eye's all right. And yeah, I think a little bit kind of to your point, I would rather have a receiver in that area, I guess is primary point. The running backs around him in value, I'm not going to like strongly argue are better than Hampton, but it's just not a range that I want to be drafting in that pool to begin with.
Could we see them go drive for drive with these guys and just pound the living hell out of people the whole game long?
I don't think it's going to be a situational split. That's kind of what I'm saying. I think it's going to be a drive for drive thing, and then we'll see.
I don't think situationally. I think they both can do whatever the Chargers are going to want them to do. This is not the situation where you have one guy that has to be the pass down guy, one guy that has to be the hammer. They both are hammers, but they're both hammers that are kind of hammers on a multi-tool kind of thing. And I think that they both could be really fun to watch.
We can finish it on this. Don't rule out the idea that this could be a light version of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. And what I mean by that is two running backs who are finishing around the top 24.
I think they both carry low running back 2 value at least. Both. All right. With that, we're going to move on to Dan's first training camp battle he wants to talk about. The Broncos here. They opened camp today for their rookies. Their vets are going to be there on Saturday as well. But Dan wants to talk to us about that Bronco backfield and what we're going to make of that mess. So Dan, take it away.
Yeah, we might also talk about the team that JK Dobbins went to. And we've mentioned this a little bit in the previous episodes. This has been an ADP trend that's kind of shifted over because of that signing, right? Well, I want to start off on the RJ Harvey side of things. Look, over the last 5 years, running backs who've been taken in the second round have hit pretty consistently, pretty early for fantasy football purposes, including in redraft. So we're talking about like Breece Hall, James Cook, Javonte Williams had a really good rookie year before he got injured, DeAndre Swift. And then we have some others like Cam Akers, AJ Dillon, Miles Sanders, but still had really good rookie moments in their careers early on, just faded out a little bit faster than some of the other guys that we're talking about. But that's a pretty good range over the last 5 years of guys who have gone in the second round and what they've been able to turn around and do. And I think RJ Harvey definitely has the profile to be pretty successful. So Dobbins comes in, right? And it's kind of making it murky as far as what is the value of RJ Harvey? Really, what are you comfortable drafting at it? But I want to point this out. One, Dobbins has literally never made it through an entire season healthy, whether it was a major injury or not a major injury. It doesn't matter. I wouldn't count on it to happen this time. And Dobbins right now, if you don't remember watching the games last year or watching what he was on a week-to-week basis, you might get kind of swept up in the box score of his overall season and not really look at the context of the details. So if you look at if you're a guy who likes that yards per carry, just to see how efficient a guy was throughout the year, you see, 4.6, pretty solid out of JK Dobbins. The problem is he only had 5 of his 13 games went over 4 yards per carry. 7 of his 13 games were 3.8 or less. It was wildly inconsistent with his efficiencies. This wasn't a guy you were getting on a week-to-week basis. He just surprised a lot of people for what you paid for him, which was next to nothing when you drafted him last season. And then we have to talk about, the Sean Payton of it all, right? Like, there's going to be a split. Sean Payton has a long history of splitting up his running backs. Let's just look at last year with a subpar running back group. Javonte Williams played just over 50% of the snaps. And as far as the running back deviation of the carries, it was Javonte with 42%, Jaleel McLaughlin with 34%, and Audric Estime with 23%. Now, I do think RJ Harvey and JK Dobbins will consolidate that from 3 to 2, and also they're much better than all 3 of those players at this point. But does that mean it's a likely 50-50 split? I think it could hover in that area, especially early on in the season. So really it comes down to, okay, RJ Harvey's going out running back 22. There's going to be a little bit to the Najee Harris, Omarion and Hampton point. It could be a series by series basis for all we know with the way Sean Payton's going to use them, because Dobbins and RJ Harvey both have very similar skill sets. So they can do a little bit of everything, but not overly big, overly powerful to carry a huge, necessarily bell cow workload. So RJ Harvey's going to RB 22, and then Dobbins is going at running back 42. So you're talking about the difference of a 5th round, 6th round pick to a 10th round pick between those two. Is the value gap that big? Well, I'm going to kind of use the same argument I just used for Najee and Omarion, in the sense where I think it's going to be that big by the time the season's end. And in this case, unlike with Najee, who's never really missed any games, I'm kind of banking on at some point, Dom is going to miss a handful of games. RJ Harvey kind of establishes himself and never really relinquishes it back, at least not to the point where there's any question about Harvey getting enough touches to be, let's say, a top 24, top 20 running back moving into next season. This is a team that has a decent offensive line. They're going to have a decent offense. And Sean Payton, even in his rotation throughout his history, for the most part, has had a running back or even 2 that was pretty significant for fantasy football purposes. So it's a battle I'm looking out for, because I want to know exactly where I'm comfortable drafting Harvey. I think I'm comfortable drafting at 22. And I think you're getting to the tier there when you get to the back end of the running backs with the wide receiver comparisons. I think I'm actually okay with the wide receivers going around his range, because of the pop that he could represent, being how efficient of a runner he is later on in the season. Let me see what you guys think.
I think what's really interesting to me with the Dobbins, like the idea of Dobbins taking much away from Harvey, is that, like, in terms of strengths, right? There's some overlap for sure. Like, let's not get carried away. But in terms of strengths, right? Like, where this isn't the same situation as Hampton and Najee, the best yards per route run over a season in JK Dobbins' career is 1. Like, this is not like, as a receiver, like, JK Harvey last year was a better receiver than, like, out of the box, RJ Harvey. The 2-letter, the 2-letter names are killing me.
I want to combine them too. It'd be great.
It would be great, because there's some differences in their skill sets. But no, RJ Harvey, just much better receiver immediately. And then I guess the other part is, like, where we talk about Najee, like, as the pass pro guy and what have you. Like, I'm not going to call Dobbins a bad pass protector. In fact, he was pretty good with the Chargers, but that's not, like, been the name of his game in the NFL. And he wasn't, a fantastic, actually outright, like, he was taken off the field at times for the Ravens in pass protection situations. Like, that is something where I think he's developed. And for the Chargers, they weren't, like, taking him off the field. And I think he, it was adequate as a pass protector, but it's not like it's his strength. Like, this is not like Najee will get signed and get opportunities in the NFL because he's a good pass protector. That is not JK Dobbins. That is not who JK Dobbins is. It's adequate. You're not necessarily taking him off the field for someone else to do it, but, like, this isn't like, oh, JK Dobbins is such a good pass protector that Harvey can't come on the field for 3rd down. Like, no. That they're gonna make way for the better receiver if neither of them are that great at pass protection, to be honest with you. Like, so I think that provides a much better opportunity for Harvey to establish himself, kind of regardless of what happens with Dobbins. And then, kind of to your point, Dobbins will get hurt at some point, and even if he doesn't, what we saw last season is that like he still has it in him to start a season hot. But even if he doesn't necessarily get hurt, I don't know that he has it physically in him to give 100% for the entirety of a season, regardless of health. Like it's just, the body is doing the best it can.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm reluctant to chime in on this because, as I've said before, I'm sharing a tent with JK. I'm broke running back mountain. I love him, and I wish that he had an opportunity. But I think I have to agree that RJ Harvey eventually ends up with not just the lion's share of this load, but yeah, the fantasy relevance here. I love JK Dobbins, but I think RJ Harvey can give Sean Payton what he's been missing at that running back position here for years now, since he left New Orleans, because of that explosive ability, and because I think, he's going to be able to receive, and I think that he's going to be able to find holes and split them. This is going to be a good offense, a decent offense. I doubted their rookie quarterback last season, and he kind of proved me wrong. I don't want to doubt the rookie running back this season. So I think that this is RJ Harvey's game and job to lose. And JK Dobbins, I love you, friend, but hold out for one more year, and maybe you can go somewhere next year. Then I think that's going to cover that. So with that, let's move on to our second. Each of us, we can talk about our second battle. And my second battle here, we're going to move to the great state of Indiana here, and a team that's near and dear to Mr. LaRue's heart. We're going to talk about the Colts and their quarterback battle. Now, their camp opens up for rookies on Monday, this coming Monday, the 21st, and then their vets will be in the very next day. But they're going to hit the ground running when they get into camp here for this quarterback situation on Tuesday. And listen, we all know, if you've followed our show, you've heard my take on this in terms of Anthony Richardson versus Daniel Jones. But let's just rehash it, and let's get in depth in it for a few minutes here. Anthony Richardson is kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly of fantasy quarterbacks and quarterbacks in the NFL in general here. Okay, guys, there's the good, right? Fantasy-wise, he runs about 7 or 8 times a game, and he scores about once out of every 11 rushes. Okay, so he's not quite getting you a touchdown, per game kind of thing that way, but he's gonna run the ball whenever he's in there, and he's going to be effective when he does it. He's got 111 rushing attempts in 15 career games, and in 2023, he had that amazing 4-game stretch, scoring 18.2 fantasy points per game. That was good for top 12 numbers there. We really thought, okay, yeah, this might be a thing. We might be able to get what we were hoping to get out of him if we took him in Dynasty there. His combine numbers, we all know that story. I mean, doing things that literally quarterbacks had never done before. He ran a 4.43 40. He had a 40.5-inch vertical, a 10-foot 9-inch broad jump. The only thing I'll caution about that is I haven't seen him have to jump 40 inches straight up in the air in his backfield yet, or jump 11 feet straight forward from 2 feet at any given point in a football game, college or pros. But he's 6'4", he's 244, and I think everybody is still in love with that athleticism, as they kind of maybe should be. We get excited about traits in that. He's got an efficient throwing motion. He's got a ton of arm strength. I've said it before. If I ran a pass pattern here in my backyard, he could hit me from camp here in Indianapolis, okay? Yeah, I mean, we've all seen the highlights of the back foot touchdown he threw to Alec Pierce that traveled over 65 air yards. It's the longest non-Hail Mary completion in next-gen stat history there. But there's also the bad, like I said. And the bad is he's only 8-7 in those 15 games. And again, it's 15 games. In 2 seasons, he's basically missed 1 full season. They've only had him for not even a full season in 2 years here to be able to see him on the field, to be able to get him out there, see what he's got to offer here. The guy was the number 4 overall pick when they took him. They had a need that season for offensive line. They needed cornerback help. They needed receiver help. You can disagree with me if you want to later, Adam, but every single player at those 3 positions was still on the board when they picked at number 4 there with Anthony Richardson there. Everybody knew the questions about Anthony Richardson as a passer coming into the NFL. If they didn't like any of those other players, they could have gained capital, and they could have used the draft capital, to be honest with you. They could have moved back and still gotten a very good player at any of those other 3 positions, any offensive lineman they wanted, any cornerback, any receiver. They chose to skip it and take Anthony Richardson. So they're dealing with that kind of, cloud over their shoulders there. And his fantasy points per game last season, when he actually played more than 4 games, dropped to only 14.9. That's not great. Okay. But now we're going to get to the ugly. I said it was the good, bad, and ugly. Let's talk about the ugly with Richardson, because I just see the ugly all over the place. It's about all I can look at with him. I'm going to say it again. He can't pass. He can throw the hell out of the ball. He can't pass at an NFL level. His career completion percentage, 50.6%. It actually dipped last season from 59.5, which might have been stomachable. His rookie season, again, only 4 games worth. His pass completion percentage last year dipped to 47.7, less than 50% of his passes. That's terrible. That is not NFL level hitting your receivers. That cannot hold if he wants to remain a quarterback in the NFL. His yards per attempt for his career, for all the arm strength that he has and as far as he can chuck it, 6.9 yards per attempt so far in 15 games. That ranked, and that's been remarkably consistent between the small sample size of his rookie year and last year. 6.9 both seasons, okay? Last year, he ranked 37th in yards per attempt, behind such, downfield monsters, juggernauts as Tanner McKee and Mitch frickin' Trubisky, okay? He's just not an NFL caliber passer. He has a career rating of 67.8. And then on top of all of that, we have the injury risk. He's going to run, but because of his style, he's got a physical running style. He's a big guy. He's going to get hit. He's had concussions. He's had sprains and tears in his hip and his back and his knee. And now, since this spring, he's had 2 shoulder AC joint sprains in his throwing shoulder. And this one might keep him out for a little bit while. Oh. So when I look at it, I just think, man, everything is set there for Daniel Jones to be able to take this job. Daniel Jones, he only runs about 6 times a game. He's only got a touchdown every 26 or 27 attempts. But in 2022, that guy ran for 708 yards and 7 touchdowns. He was only behind Fields, Lamar, Josh Allen, and Jalen Hurts that season for his yardage. And he tied for 3rd in touchdowns that season with Josh Allen. He is a capable running quarterback. So for fantasy standpoint, we like that. He's only scored 14.9 fantasy points per game in his career. I will give you that. But that 2022 season, he was up over 18. It is in there for him to be able to do that. Now, yes, that might be his absolute ceiling, but at least the man can pass the football at an NFL level, albeit a short level. He still runs fast enough. He's 4.72 in the 40, but he has had a 70-47 touchdown to interception rate in his career. Mr. Richardson has more interceptions than touchdown passes in his career. And he cannot, that can't hold. That can't hold at the NFL level. Daniel Jones has a career rating of 84.3. He doesn't shoot the lights out, but this is going to be the best receiving core he's had. If it's going to happen for him, he needs to show out now. Okay. This Colts front office, I see him as a no-win situation here. They're probably, playing for their jobs in a few ways this season, but what's the best way that they think to save them? Is it going to be to give up on the guy that you shouldn't have drafted 4th overall and you hope to win more games with Daniel Jones? Does that save your job? Or do you shoehorn the number 4 guy in, knowing that everything can collapse, in the span of just one play? For their sakes, right now, Steichen said he was pleased with Jones, when Richardson was missing time with that shoulder injury. But he's also said that the most consistent will be their week 1 starter when they host the Dolphins in week 1 there. And I just don't see how it cannot end up being Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones is better for us as a fantasy option at quarterback, but also, as we talked about with the Browns, for the weapons around him. Tyler Warren, if you want to get something out of that guy, if you want something out of Josh Downs underneath, if you want something out of Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce even, he's not going to throw it far, but at least he can hit him 6 out of 10 times. What are your takes on it here? Adam, let's start with you since you're the Colts fan.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of talking about the fantasy relevant portions, I don't think it's any conversation. I think it's very clear that Daniel Jones, for the most relevant fantasy assets, is best case scenario. The only players on the Colts who, from a fantasy perspective, benefit from Anthony Richardson, I would disagree with you. I think Alec Pierce benefits from Richardson. I think Pierce, Adonai Mitchell. I think Tyler Warren, there's an argument. And I think Jonathan Taylor benefits from Anthony Richardson. But in terms of Pittman, if you want Pittman to have any realistic volume, it's by far way better for Daniel Jones. If you want Josh Downs to have a good season, by far, not close, way better for Daniel Jones. So I think those, and Jonathan Taylor would be fine either way. I think when it boils down to Tyler Warren, it's, I think in the red zone, he's going to do a little bit better with Richardson. I think you're going to get a little bit more volume with Daniel Jones. And I think for a rookie tight end, you're not getting a ton of volume regardless. So that's why I would err towards Richardson, because I think you skew towards the touchdowns for a rookie tight end. But I think, you probably have a more impactful season, like in terms of the on the field football playing with Daniel Jones. I just think from a fantasy perspective, his points might be higher with Richardson. But at any rate, I think for the team, I think it's a little bit more nuanced. I think that the worst case scenario for the Colts is that you go 9-8 with Daniel Jones. That's like the worst thing that could possibly happen. You're setting your franchise back multiple years. Like, everyone should be fired. Like, everyone. The janitor should not stay if you go 9-8 with Daniel Jones. Like, worst thing that could possibly happen. So to me, you sink or swim with Anthony Richardson, so at least you have the opportunity to sink. Because to the point, if you go with Daniel Jones, he's Mr. Consistent throughout the season. He consistently throws 1.5 touchdowns a week. He consistently throws 6 yards per attempt. Probably going to win 9-8 games, and you're probably going to pick too deep to get a new quarterback. And, does that matter necessarily for redraft? No, but for dynasty, you look at it and you go, okay, so the Colts will still not have a quarterback for any of these weapons next season. If Daniel Jones goes 9-8 this season with the Indianapolis Colts, then we will have the same questions about quarterback next season. Guaranteed. No, like, there's no world where that gets fixed. None. Doesn't exist. The only way that the only two options for the Colts to have a real quarterback solution next season, Anthony Richardson gets his crap together, figures it out, or Anthony Richardson is atrocious, they win 4 games, and they can draft high enough to get a quarterback. Those are their outs for a quarterback. It's like, all right, unless something falls in their lap. But for Josh Downs, for Michael Pittman, best chance is Daniel Jones. So from a fantasy perspective, I will say, if one of them is going to start for quarterback, I think that Richardson's the only one that has any realistic value as a starter in themselves. But I kind of, to the Browns situation, I don't think either of them will have value as a starter by themselves. I wouldn't put either of them in my top 24 if I knew week one of them was a starter.
Dan, I've been trying to read your eyes here during this whole conversation, and it's been interesting. I want to hear you take her real quick here.
Daniel Jones is going to be the starter. Sorry, buddy. But I want to play this devil's advocate real quick. And I'm not saying I necessarily believe this, but I just want to put this out there. Is there any chance, talk about quarterbacks who didn't have potential before, show potential later on in a different situation? This is probably the best weaponry that Daniel Jones has ever had. No, I mean, Tyler Warren, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Jonathan Taylor. And I think Steichen could actually build an offense around a quarterback who maybe doesn't naturally want to sling it deep with these weapons. And with his rushing ability, it might be better than we think. It might be better than we think. I don't necessarily believe it's necessarily going to happen, but I do think it's interesting pondering to talk about, and I do think it's going to be Jones week 1. They're done.
That's why I bring up that I think he would go 8-9. Like, I don't think it's going to be a disaster class from Daniel Jones.
I'm saying
he'll be good enough to be 8-9.
I'm saying there's an argument to be made. It could be better than average.
I think there's an argument that he could be. I think there's an argument that if he is a starter from day one, they leave him there and they go with it. I think he's got potential to be a top half quarterback, like a top 16 type. So if you're in a deep league, he can be a starter type. He's got that potential. And I think there's potential that they do better win-wise with him than without him. And this is still, say what you want about the rest of the league and all the excitement about Liam Cohen in Jacksonville and what they got going on in Houston, but this is still a winnable division.
Yeah, it is. Adam, why don't you and me go rapid fire in our last 2 camp battles here before we have to close it out?
Yeah, I'll just bring up really quickly what I think is important about this camp battle, and that's Mac Hollins versus Kyle Williams. Look, if you were listening to this or looked at the outline and thought that I was going to talk about Mac Hollins potentially being fantasy relevant, you were out of your minds. So that part, let's throw that notion away right now. Mac Hollins will not be fantasy relevant. What I think is interesting about this camp battle, we've talked about Kyle Williams potentially having a ton of value for us. So that's obviously part of it, right? What we really like on this show, Kyle Williams, we think that he has a lot of potential, and that he was a really good value add for them. But I think the biggest piece of it, because I believe in the talent, I think Kyle Williams at some point in his NFL career will make it out regardless of if he wins in camp. Don't think that's the biggest deal in the world. What I think is interesting about this camp battle is I think that it is your sign on what this offense is going to be, because you don't start Matt Collins as a receiver regardless. He has broken 600 yards once in his career. Career high is 690, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's his only time above 500 yards. I'm not looking at the stats right this second. Someone can fact check me. I think that's true. I'm pretty sure that's true. Not think. At any rate, you play him because he is a dang good run blocker as a wide receiver. So if you are going to be a run-heavy team with Ramondre Steven and Travion Henderson, there's an argument that he is a bona fide starter for you because he can help you in that sense. And I'm not even going to completely argue that he shouldn't start in that sense if that's your identity. But I think this is a camp battle that can be a lead on what the identity of this offense is going to be, because we've seen it both ways with Josh McDaniels. We've seen him be someone who will throw the ball quite a bit. We've seen him run the ball quite a bit. So it's hard to necessarily say right now, and I think this is one of the battles that is going to be a lead indicator on what this offense is.
To fact check, Matt Collins has one season of over 400 yards, and yes, it was 3 seasons ago with the Raiders. Dan, let's hear about you.
Close enough. Well, I like that you mentioned that because I want to talk about Trey Harris, Mike Williams, Quinshon Judkins, because we can't get away from the Chargers, right? And we have this battle who might be the starter opposite side of Ladd McConkey. Well, I mentioned the second round hit rate for running backs for RJ Harvey hasn't been quite as great for the wide receiver position. But we have Mike Williams, who's been 2 years of playing 9 games and already has a hamstring issue now as it is. Last year, his target separation was 0.82. His yards per route run was 0.89. There's a far more likely chance that Mike Williams is just toast at this point of his career to begin with. Now, Quentin Johnston, on the other hand, he actually became a serviceable NFL wide receiver last year. But I think that's his ceiling. Like, he had a 21% target share, which is okay. It's solid. He had a 1.93 yards per route run. Again, ranked 35th, solid. 1.67 target separation last year. Again, also ranked 35th, solid. But all of that was only with one legitimate target on the offense. There's nobody else throwing the ball to. And as I mentioned before, Justin Herbert on the back end of the season, they started throwing the ball more at an average pace NFL wise, but it was a significant increase from what we had saw the first 4 weeks in the beginning of the year last year. So that's all he was really able to muster. I don't think he has another ceiling outside of that. Trey Harris right now, who, by the way, was unfreaking believable until he picked up an injury later on in the season. And even then he was still pretty good, just not as off the charts and crazy. And remember, he was a little bit injured during the combine. So I still think he might have ran a faster 40 than what he gave, which was solid enough given his size. But he's going as wide receiver 56 in the 11th round. And now he's one of the rookies that's officially holding out, right? So this is going to change, obviously, when we get to August, when most people are going to be drafting, but his ADP probably over the next couple of weeks is going to shift a little bit. You're looking for sleeper wide receivers who might really pay off for you in a big way. It would not surprise me at all if Trey Harris goes from wide receiver 56 to a wide receiver 30 range come the season with his skill set and how it complements Ladd McConkey. And again, they still can focus their passing game really around 2 players. Like, Elijah Gadsden's nice to think about, but it's a rookie tight end who can't block. I don't know how much he's really going to play for Jim Harbaugh at the end of the day. So I'm looking at Trey Harris. I look at Ladd McConkey. I don't think Quentin Johnston is going to be a big factor. So I'm going to be curious to watch this battle. If it pans out where Trey Harris can be the starter week 1, I think you got a real sleeper on your hands with an offense that's going to be passing, I think, at least 32 times a game heading into next season. But that's going to have to close it up for today's show. We'll get to more battles, but next week we're going to talk to Dr. Brian Scott to talk about the injuries as we get into training camp of what we got to look out for. Remember, we're getting you prepped here on Operation Domination for the season. Make sure you download us on your favorite podcast app and subscribe to the YouTube channel at FF Advice Net, and we'll see you guys real soon.